Louis XIV was only 5 years old when his father, Louis XIII, passed away in 1643. Now, since he's only 5, he's of course not really running the show. He is going to use an assistant. This was Cardinal Mazarin, his leader and voice for French government. However, Louis was encouraged before Cardinal Mazarin passed away to take ultimate and total control over France. In 1663, Louis will finally take steps to become the sole power of France. At just 25 years old, he controlled the French Empire. 1663, 25-year-old French king wants to show that he's the most powerful. I wonder what our British king might do to show that he was more powerful than his cousin Louis XIV. Remember, it is our British king that is going to take away another country's colony in the year 1664. New York's transitional birthday is not a surprise when you consider the competition that Charles felt with his cousin. Louis XIV will rule through that entire time of all of those English kings and queens, all the way to 1715. He was known as the Sun King. The entire world revolved around him, or at least that was his belief. He is going to be the king who will build a tiny chateau known as Versailles, sleeping 25,000 people. I'm going to let us pause for a minute and look at some of our posted photos of the Grand Palace of Versailles. French King Louis XIV is going to want every single luxury available. He's going to use his territory of New France to gain it. The area that we think of as New France started off with the region of Fort Caroline. Now, we remember the situation taking place in Jacksonville was not very successful. And so, of course, it's after that that we will see any French colonization either moving far north away or further south. Our next location was Quebec. In 1608, the city that we think of as the walled city of Quebec is going to be established. Built as a citadel, it was designed to protect the very lucrative fur trade that will take place off of the St. Lawrence River. After taking control over Quebec, our French fur trappers are going to continue sailing down the St. Lawrence River and establishing more cities. The location of Mount Royal or Montreal is going to be next. Now, during the same time, we'll also see establishments in the Caribbean. So in 1626, the island of Guadeloupe, as well as in 1635, the island of Martinique, are both going to start flying the French flags. And as the century progresses, we're going to see more expansion further south, down the Mississippi River, until ultimately in 1701, the establishment of what we now call New Orleans. All along the water routes, all through the St. Lawrence River, down to New Orleans, the delta of the Mississippi, this was all New France. And something to remember, the French colonists of this territory were now Catholic. Unlike our earlier Huguenots of Fort Caroline, the new colonists are all going to be Catholic. And for the most part, they were men. They were men who are going to be firmly entrenched into the fur industry, into the fishing and cod industry, into the sugar there in the West Indies. Now, these gentlemen are going to look for some female companionship, and that usually is going to come through a union with an indigenous woman, which means that the French population here in the New World is not only French, but we will also see people of both French and Native American heritage. Their strong relationship with the native peoples, as well as the intermarriage, is going to unify the French with the American Indian. This means later on, when we get to the French and Indian War, that it is going to be the French who worked with the Native Americans against our British and American colonists. At the turn of the century, around 1700, the population of New France is going to be approximately 15,000 people. That is a great deal smaller than the population of the English colonies, which was around 250,000. We remember our English history, and we remember the history of the English with the indigenous peoples. the expansion, displacement, and violence that had taken place in many locations such as Virginia and later on South Carolina. It's not going to be a surprise to us that through the intermarriage with the native population and the strong trading that you're going to see a unification of the French with the American Indians in what we know as the Imperial War, the French and Indian War. However, before we get to that war, we've got a couple of others to discuss as well. Although cousin, with families long intertwined, the British and the French are going to fight a series of imperial wars, wars for empire. Both countries will be trying to establish themselves as the ultimate power of the world. These are going to become world wars. What we're going to do next is begin looking at these world wars as they lead to quite a bit of debt, and that will help lead us to the American Revolution. We will see a succession of imperial wars between England and France. For each one of these wars, we will talk about the name of it over in Europe, the name of it here in the colonies, and then ultimately the treaty. So for our very first war, this is roughly France versus the rest of the world. It's known as the War of Grand Alliance. Here for the English colonists, it's also known as King William's War. Here in the colonies, when it comes to naming our wars, we're not very imaginative. So pretty much just who was the monarch, it's their war. When William and Mary took over as the reigning monarchs of England, William was already fighting a war against France. This is going to continue under his now new title of King of England. Now, as to the actual fighting here in the colonies, remember, this is before we even have all of our colonies, which means that the fighting here, for the most part, is going to be proxy war. In a proxy war, a government or a monarch, one side or the other, or both, usually fund someone else to do the actual fighting for you. In our case here in King William's War, this is going to be funded by the two empires, England and France, but the people fighting are predominantly going to be Native Americans. The Mohegan and Iroquois were allies of the English. The Wampanoag and Narragansett, they were allies of the French. These two groups are then going to fight against each other. They will both be funded through their European allies. We're going to see a series of raids against each other, as well as the villages and communities that traded with these indigenous peoples. When King William's War is done, who won? I can tell you who lost. Ultimately, this war ends with the peace treaty. It's known as the Treaty of Ryswick. Both sides are going to get a little bit. William is recognized by Louis XIV as the actual King of England. We remember that James, after being kicked out by his daughter and son-in-law, he fled to France. He was being protected by the King of France. Here, Louis will go ahead and recognize that no, James is not the rightful king, that William was crowned the true King of England. On the other hand, Louis is going to gain territory. France is going to gain the areas of Haiti and Nova Scotia. When they take claim over more land, that's important to remember. When one country gains more territory, this is ultimately the true winner. In those days, land is going to equal power. So the true winner of this one, you might make a claim for Louis and France.